Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the Cyber Gizmo, I'd like to delve in and talk about the new Ubuntu 25.10 release. So in this video, I'll walk you through what's all this, what's new, what's changed, and what might you expect to test your patience. This is the final interim build before 2604. Canonical is using it to test every bold idea that they have, that they plan to lock down next year. So I don't know which ones will make it and which ones won't. So under the hood, you'll find a cgroup version 2, enhanced AppArmor to SELinux parity, and a GNOME session that's built entirely on Wayland. You'll also find the same is true of KDE. It also is built entirely on Wayland. This isn't a minor update, it's a dress rehearsal for the LTS that's coming. The kernel is 6.17, and that has introduced new system calls, and to be more precise, it has added file attribute handling. That may sound kind of small, but they're critical for Mac for mandatory access control. So let's talk a little bit about SELinux and AppArmor. Ubuntu still ships AppArmor enabled by default, but now offers a clean SELinux support for those ready to switch. Even though migration is possible, I guarantee you it will be painful. I tried it on 2404 and ended up rebuilding the system from scratch. So if you go down this path of moving over to SELinux, quite honestly, the way things sit right now, I would recommend just go to Fedora or Rocky, because they already have SELinux set up, Rocky or Alma Linux. This is the first production kernel to ship with Panther Lake support. Now, when I say Panther Lake support, this is initial Panther Lake support. That's for Intel's upcoming 18A processor architecture. What does initial support mean? Well, it means that it'll boot, but some things like audio, HDMI, and Wi-Fi may have problems. They may not work. Bluetooth may not work. You may find random things like on your machine, the front panel USBs don't work either. So, because those all require driver support, and those drivers may not be available. The other thing with this new kernel is that you can't run those architectures anymore. So if you have a Pentium 4 or a Pentium 3, something of that older vintage that only supports a single processor, yeah, you can't run it anymore with 6.17. You can run it on an older kernel, but not on 6.17. It won't run. That requires SMP. That means you have to have a dual core. So there is no support for single core processors anymore. So Wayland is now the only default session for GNOME and KDE. So what does that mean? So that means there's no more X11 login sessions. Also, there's no process for Xorg. If you're trying to run software that is dependent on X11, that's going to go through Wayland. And so things like that are trying to grab direct video support, like you might see in VNC or even in Ramina, it's not going to work on GNOME or on KDE. However, there's a couple of caveats here. So the first one is, if you want to run X11, you can, and still run Ubuntu. You can install XFCE or LXQT or Cinnamon. All of those support an Xorg environment. So there is one other thing that you can try. On GNOME, there is no package that I have found yet where it'll allow an X11 session. But on KDE, they have a package that if you install it, it will push the X11 option back onto your login screen. Now, I haven't been able to try that, and I'll tell you why. This is one of the problems I ran into. When I downloaded Kubuntu, which is the KDE version of Ubuntu, I always bring down the ISO and then I do a check to see whether or not the signature is the same. So I ran SHA-256 sum and compared my version of the ISO to what they said it should be. They didn't match. My reaction to that is always the same. I download it again, try it again, see if maybe it was something in the download. It's not. I got the same result. It's not the same as what they published it should be. And at that point, what I do is delete it. I delete the ISO, get rid of it. It could be just a mistake, but it also could be somebody has tainted it. So I don't want to take the chance. If you install that, it will restore the X11 session. However, the documentation is talking about LDDM. LDDM is the thing that LXQT uses. KDE years ago used to use that, but they haven't used it in a long time. KDE is based on SDDM today. Most apps, however, should work okay on Wayland, but you may have some legacy xlib programs, or you have some that are using mechanisms that Wayland doesn't support, like you would find with VNC, Ramina, and even oneko. Oneko is a good test. If you want to find out if direct manipulation is supported, I think that's it. Yeah. Let's test it. The oneko app exploits that hole in the security of X11 to do this little trick. And you just put it in the background and it should come. There he is. He's chasing. Yeah, see, he can go right across the window, and after a while, it should go to sleep. He'll take a nap. Just install oneko. Oneko is a cat that will chase your cursor, and it requires direct access. Oneko will not run on Wayland. So if you want to make sure that you've got a true X11 environment, then you can install and run oneko. And then it will produce that little cat that chases your mouse around on the screen. Mate may work. I just didn't test it. I just don't know. NVIDIA users get additional driver updates with 580. And that offers better Wayland sync support and fractional scaling. But it still makes 4K monitors look like you'll need glasses. They're still a little fuzzy. Remote desktop and Wayland reality. So we talked about this a little bit. With GNOME, X11 is gone. And so anything that uses VNC or X forwarding methods, they won't work because Wayland doesn't support those kinds of things. Canonical now will point you to Microsoft's RDP protocol. So what I'd like to do here is to see if Spice will run. This is Fedora 42. So let's go ahead and start this. Let's see, I do get a Spice file. Oh, this is good. Let's expand that. See if it'll log in. Can I do anything? Oh yeah, I can. I can manipulate the window. How about this? Ooh, that works. How about this? All right, that's good. So Spice is working. LibreOffice. Probably something most of you won't care about, but some of us do. AI and hardware updates. OpenVINO now offers 2025.2 that is shipping out of the box with Ubuntu 25.10. So That brings a faster model and inference and new support for Intel and AMD GPUs. SMP and performance scheduling. So Ubuntu's kernel now enforces SMP as a requirement, and you cannot disable it. This simplifies, allegedly, the scheduler and removes edge cases for multi-threaded systems. System D also removes support for System 5 init scripts. No longer are those supported. In closing, don't blame Ubuntu for the changes that are coming on Wayland. Those are being pushed by the GNOME team and by the KDE team. So in order to get there. Now, I don't know how long the KDE workaround will be, a package they offer. It could very well disappear in the next release of Plasma. But at least they give you a chance that, hey, if you want to bring X11 back, you can. One of those changes that we didn't talk about was sudo. Sudo has been rewritten in Rust, called sudo rs. However, if you want the old sudo back, you can install it. You can uninstall the Rust version and install the the C version of the code. The things you may run into is if you're using some of the more obscure features of sudo, those haven't been implemented in the Rust set yet. If you've been around Linux for any length of time, you know this, that during the release cycles of new distributions coming and going, the developers of packages will cut a marker in the sand and say, okay, we're going to get this much core features done by that release so that they're ready for Ubuntu 25.10, but we'll continue working on it, and the next release, like 26.04, will have the new changes for the Rust version. So that's just the way Linux works. Ubuntu 25.10 isn't just another interim release. It's a line in the sand between the old versions of Linux and the new. The question isn't whether you like Wayland, System D, or SELinux. It's whether you understand them, because the future of open source is still freedom, but freedom requires knowledge. And that knowledge starts with curiosity, or as this release reminds us, a little questing. And it might be that these bigger or more corporate style releases aren't for you. And maybe, like me, you're looking at systems like MX or Dev1 in order to continue using Linux the way you want to use it. If you want full control over it, yes, then that's the way to go. I am going to spend a little bit of time after this and talk about the benchmark. So if you're interested in what I found out performance-wise about Ubuntu 25.10, and how it compares to systems like Linux Mint 22.2, Rocky 10, Debian 13, Fedora 42. I don't have 43 yet. So yeah, we can explore that together. Will you run into issues with this? Yeah, probably. I ran into a few. One of the ones I ran into was after, this was on a VM, when the screen timed out, which was, it's in console mode. When the screen timed out, trying to go back into it again, it froze. It showed me the screen. It showed me the login screen. When I tried to click on it to get the user ID and the password to pop up, nothing happened. I was running the benchmarks while this was all going on. So eventually, like one of the times, it just froze. I couldn't get out of it. So I let the benchmark finish, because that's why I have SSH set up when I do my benchmark, so I have a way in if I need it, so that I can take that file that it generates and upload it to openbenchmark.org. Yeah, we're going to run through the RAM speed tests, and you can kind of see that, Ubuntu is a little bit behind Debian in most cases. They're running on the same virtual machine, so this shouldn't have any difference at all. But it does, and you'll see that it tracks, even on the Steam benchmark, it tracks a little bit behind. On the tiny benchmark, it's still a little bit behind. It's pretty close, but it's still behind Debian and even Fedora. On the standard mem set, you'll see, yeah, it's a little bit ahead of Fedora, maybe not too much, but MBW, yeah, it's on par with Linux Mint and Debian, but still just trailing behind. Crypto, it's doing better here, but Fedora outpaces it. The LHPL LinPack, Ubuntu crushes this one in comparison to most of them. Now, Fedora also does. And remember, these two have the same kernel. Well, it's close. I couldn't get Ubuntu to work. None of the Debians seem to work. I don't know. It looks like it's probably missing the headers. Linux Mint did the best on C-Ray. Pabre, Linux Mint again does better on that particular application. OpenSSL, yeah, Fedora does good, but Ubuntu walked away with this one on AES. The other two should have had encryption, but didn't appear like they worked. It didn't kick in. Same on this version of the ASA. The test. So Ubuntu won this one as well. LibreOffice, Linux Mint took this one. Stress NG, this one's going to be kind of all over the map. Debian does well on the hash test. These are meant to crash a kernel, so they're pretty intensive. Rocky does well in the MMAT test. Numa, I would expect Ubuntu would do much better here because that's exactly what 6.17 improved. Debian's on a 6.12 kernel. Stress NG, yeah, Ubuntu walked away with the pipe. Polls, Ubuntu again won that one, followed by Fedora. Zlib. This time Ubuntu didn't do as well. Fedora did better, and so did Rocky. Stress NG. Fedora did better. This is the Futex. MamFD. Fedora took this one, or excuse me, Ubuntu took this one, followed by Fedora. Mutex. These are all kernel tests. Fedora did much better. That's the older kernel, 6.16 versus 6.17. Atomic, I would say that was Debian. Crypto only had, I don't know, Rocky and Fedora and Debian just fell apart. So we have Malik, and Debian did best here, followed by Ubuntu. Forking, which is how you start processes on Linux, and Ubuntu did quite well there. They're number one. Pthread, Ubuntu was number one here on that one. AVL tree. Now I would expect to see the newer kernel do better here, and it does. They constantly are doing stuff with AVL and the IOU ring. Linux Mint does well, Debian does well, and Ubuntu edges it out. Says number one there. Send file. We have Ubuntu wrapping that one up. Cache testing for the CPU cache. Debian took this one on a slight edge, but yeah, slightly edged it out. And CPU stress test, Ubuntu took that one. Semaphores, Fedora did, looks like second place, and Ubuntu took first. Matrix maths, that would be Debian this time, with Ubuntu coming in second. Linux Mint didn't do too well here. Debian won the vector math, followed by Ubuntu. ABX 512 VNNI. I would expect Ubuntu would walk that one because of the newer kernels. Yeah, test the function call. That looks like Debian took that, followed by Ubuntu. x86-64 already random. So Ubuntu did well here, followed by Fedora and Linux Mint. Debian didn't post, and neither did Rocky. Floating point, that would be Ubuntu on that, followed by Fedora. Looks like those are pretty even, except Fedora took that test. And in memcopy, I would say that would be Ubuntu, just slightly. It's in the noise. Now in the socket activity, Ubuntu didn't do too well in network, and there are some enhancements to Systemd is doing a lot of the networking stuff now. So context switching, Ubuntu did well, followed by Fedora. And let's see. Also, fused multiply. Looks like Ubuntu took first there. glib C-string functions. Ubuntu took first there. glib qsort. Ubuntu edged it just barely over Debian. System 5 message passing. Ubuntu did well, followed by Linux Mint. PHP benchmarking suite. Yeah, that would be Debian, followed by Ubuntu. The speed test CLI. Ubuntu took that. And we had a couple that didn't post, Linux Mint and Fedora. Also, we had the speed test on the upload. Ubuntu won that one. Internet latency. Somebody said there's no difference in latency. Well, there's a difference in latency right there. Same machine, same hardware. Algorithms, RSA, OpenSSL. We have Ubuntu. RSA 4096, Ubuntu, followed by Fedora. And then the harmonic mean of all the tests. So we had Debian in first place, followed by Ubuntu on that one. And Rocky in last place with that. In the harmonic mean of the BOGO ops, you would expect a flip, and that's kind of what happened. Fedora took first, Linux Mint was last, and Ubuntu was second. Close second, anyway. The geometric mean of all the tests, Linux Mint, Ubuntu won that one, as you would expect, because they had more of the stress tests in their favor. So there you go. There's the ranking on the different versions. I've said this before. I'll say it again. Don't compare the first to the last place. They're not the same things. These are the count of the number of times Ubuntu placed first, and the count that Debian placed first, and the count that Fedora placed first. They're not mutually exclusive. The second pie chart is the number of times these things posted last. So, yeah, don't compare them together. They don't compare. So I'm telling you that up front. Rocky had overall the highest number of last place finishes. So, and the same, and then Linux Mint, followed by Debian, followed by Ubuntu, followed by Fedora. Although Ubuntu and Fedora were tied at 2. So, that is our benchmark scores. Ubuntu did quite well. That's all I had for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe, and bye for now.